Good evening. I had the great fortune of leaving here and within a month's time beginning work as Gail Collins' researcher at the New York Times. It was a period of transition, with Gail just having left her post as the first woman to edit the New York Times' editorial page. And it was also a time that she was able to return back to her first love as a columnist on the op-ed page. And with the presidential primary heating up, it was a year and a half of constant comedic grist, perfect for her columnist mill. From Mitt Romney's Irish setter Seamus, now deceased, who forever lives on in perpetuity, strapped to the roof of the family station wagon, to making sense of what exactly Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin's candidacies did and did not mean for American women going forward, Gail was in heaven. She has been an opinion writer for most of her life, whether first at the Daily News or Newsday before landing at the Times. Her first jobs in journalism were in Connecticut, where she founded the Connecticut State News Bureau, which provided coverage of the state capitol and Connecticut politics. When she sold it in 1977, it was the largest news service of its kind in the country, with more than 30 weekly and daily newspaper chains. A sequel to her book, America's Women, will be out next fall. It picks up right where she left off, chronicling women 1960 to present. The presidential race and Hillary and Sarah make up its final chapter. Please join me in welcoming tonight Gail Collins.
Thank you. Is this good? Can you hear me? Is that all right? Yell if you can't, and I'll yell louder or do whatever. I want to thank Amanda for the introduction. It was, when I came back to work, I needed a researcher right away, and was kindly sent, I think, 5 people from Columbia, all of whom were about to graduate, all of whom were extraordinary and wonderful and would have all been fantastic researchers, but Amanda was by far the most fantastic of all, so I'm really lucky to have had her for the last year and a half, is it now? Going on 2 years that we've been doing this thing. I thought what I would, I've been asked to talk about the election tonight, and I can't believe any of you want to hear another word about the election. It's been so much. It was the best thing I've ever covered. Amanda's absolutely right. I have never had so much fun in my life as I did covering this election. It was just, as if God had said, okay, columnists, this one's for you. I'm giving it all to you. It was just the best time, and not in small part because everybody cared about it so much. I have never written about stuff that everybody cared about as much as this election, anything political certainly. So all in all, it was just a great treat. And I thought what I would do, for lack of any other way to approach this, is to talk about the 4 people that seem to me to be kind of the center of the story, who were Barack Obama and John McCain and Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin, and sort of go through each one of them for you and then swiftly and carefully and brilliantly sum it all up and tell you exactly what it means. And then we could have questions, and you can tell me what you're interested in. And if you'd like, by the way, I'm happy to talk about journalism and journalism careers and the future of journalism and stuff like that, which I have noticed in my other visits to college campuses is something that many journalism students really want to hear a lot more about. But let me tell you a few of my thoughts about the candidates, and I have to admit, of the 4 of them, the one who fascinated me the most of all was Hillary Clinton. She's part of my generation, and she, in a weird way, sort of lived out the entire story of what happened to women from in the post-war era through until now. And I think because she's been such a pathbreaker, this is possibly the explanation anyway, everything she's done has been so new over the last 20, 25 years that whenever she starts a new venture, she always seems to go instantly into a disaster mode. Everything she's done, every big thing since leaving Arkansas has started out with great expectation, instantly sort of fallen into what looked like abysmal failure. And then, and this is the thing about her that I'm really so taken by, she figures it out and fixes it. And for a person to be able to do that over and over again, particularly as they get older, is to me just an extraordinary character trait. When she was First Lady, she came into it thinking that you could present a modern American marriage in the White House, that you could show a man and a woman really working as a team, as partners in the governing of the country. And it worked out very badly, so very badly that we're never going to go there again, I think, at least until everybody has died who remembers that period. It was just, didn't work at all, and it for good reason. You cannot possibly have somebody working for you who you're not allowed to fire, particularly if you have a marriage that's as complicated as their marriage turned out to be. And it went badly. The healthcare thing went very badly. She was deeply unpopular. She was hurting her husband. And then she figured it out and turned it around. And by the time she left the White House, she was really fairly popular as First Lady, and she had created a network of people, much like Eleanor Roosevelt did, of people in states around the country and countries all around the world who are working on the issues that she cared about, social welfare issues, children's issues, women's issues, and she had a huge, enormous network. On the campaign, you'd go around and you'd be in a place that no human being had ever been to before. And in a desert with 6 people from the desert standing there waiting for her. And when she'd come in, she'd say, and there's Fred, who I've worked with so hard on getting the windmill for the nursery school project here. And she'd go on and on about this stuff. She could do that anywhere. And when you see her do it over and over again, you realize this is not note cards that she's carrying around. She's carrying around all these experiences, this extraordinary network of people who she not only created but encouraged throughout the years on these issues she cared so much about. So she ended, I think, her first ladyship on a very high note, and then went on to run for the Senate in New York. Not only the first lady to run for public office, but the first lady to run for the Senate in a state that she had never lived in. I mean, it's just, when you think about it, it was wild. I mean, then there she went, did it again, and the campaign started off very badly. I knew people who were covering that campaign, and they would begin, first of all, it's all happening in upstate New York, so you're trapped on a bus forever, really. And she was giving terrible, the speeches were awful. She was very hostile to the press. She was very sort of cold. It wasn't going well at all. She was making those terrible attempts to relate to New York by talking about the great time she'd been to the Turnpike rest stop in New York when she was a child going to Pennsylvania. And she tried to pretend she cared about the Yankees. It was all horrible. And you would see these reporters who'd been with her for a while, and they started to develop these strange personal mannerisms. They, gained or lost a lot of weight. They began to laugh inappropriately at different places. They bit their fingernails. It was just, they were going nuts. And she was going nuts, and she figured it out once again. And what she did, to deal with a state in which there was a great deal of suspicion about her, particularly upstate, which is not very democratic to begin with. It's sort of a Republican conservative area, is she just went on that listening tour forever. She went from town to town and sat with these people, and again used that same networking thing, could sit for hours talking about how to get better computer connections for upstate Oswego, or what to do about snow in Winnebago, and just on and on and on and on and on. Didn't make the reporters any happier. I mean, they were even more suicidal after a while about this, but the people loved her, and the upstate New York in particular developed a real, genuine affection for her, for a person who was the most unlikely person to appeal to upstate New York you could imagine. And by the time she ran for re-election, she was a genuinely beloved senator. I mean, she did a really good job in the Senate. The Republicans, who thought they were going to just hate her guts when she got in, who were making jokes about lightning striking her perhaps and stuff like that, really came to like her. She just did very well in the Senate. She did very, very well as a senator. And then, of course, she ran for president. The first time I saw her was July before the first primary, so it was a year and a half before the election, but they were already running around all over the place. I went up to New Hampshire, and she'd already been out for quite some time. And I ran into a guy I knew who'd been on her bus for some time, and I said, well, how's it going? And he said, I've gained 30 pounds. I knew she did it again, again, and it's true. She wasn't a very good candidate. She was not organized in the caucus states. Her speeches were sort of, boring, and she did do nice kind of question and answer, listening kind of things, but there was just sort of it was all very kind of heavy, and there was no life or spark to the whole thing. And once again, she figured out what to do, and by the end of the campaign, she was a terrific candidate. I have seen few people running for office that were as good as Hillary Clinton was in those last 4 or 5 states during that presidential race. And Susan Faludi wrote a piece for us in the op-ed page that I thought was really smart, in which she said that she thought, everybody's theory was the reason Hillary won Ohio and Pennsylvania was because of racism. And Susan suggested, well, maybe it was something different and better. The problem that men have always had with women candidates is that they always seem like umpires, that they're the virtuous people sort of parachuting in to umpire and to show people what they're doing wrong and to fix things up and to make them do better. And that when Hillary came into those last states, she was so clearly not that kind of candidate. She was so clearly one of the people, that the going to the bar thing was, greatly parodied, but she really was good at that stuff. She was really great at just hanging out with working class people. And I remember there was a union thing in Pennsylvania. It was so typical of the end of the two candidates. And Hillary was there very early, and we're in the union hall, and both she and Barack were going to be there for some kind of forum. And it was not a glamorous place. It was a big union hall. And Hillary is standing there with all of these union guys, and she really did look like one of the union reps, and they're all sitting there and they're talking, and and then suddenly the lights dimmed. Music came, and then the spotlight came to the door, and in came Barack Obama. And it was like, and I thought, God, story of this person's entire campaign. Here she is. But at the end, she did a terrific job. And what she did, I think, for women that, Amanda and I have talked about a lot, is the great thing about American people, I think, in this era is that anything they can actually see and get used to, they're sort of fine with. There's very little resistance to people or things or ideas as long as they see them around and get used to them. And Hillary people got people used to the idea that there'd be a woman president. I think it's totally normal to people now. Anybody who wants to take it next time, it's not going to be the same huge lift. People are now completely ready, I think, for a woman to run for president and win, and she did that. And if it's her or it's not her, she did an amazing thing. And I'm sure she'll be an amazing Secretary of State. I wrote the other day, given her record, I would not want to be the first trouble country that she went to. But the third or the fourth, she'll be fantastic. It'll be really, really good. John McCain is the opposite of Hillary Clinton. The story of John McCain to me is that he's a person who does not and could not change, could not figure out what was wrong and change it. The John McCain campaign in 2000 in New Hampshire was one of the 2 or 3 best things I've ever seen in politics. It was just one of those golden minutes where the candidate and the time and the people and the venue all just get together, and you just feel it. It just felt really right. It was hard to remember, but 2000 was a very boring year. The economy was okay as far as we could tell, and we were at peace at home and abroad. And there wasn't really much to argue about during the campaign. It was not a high-stakes campaign as we saw it then. And he brought out these other issues, campaign finance reform, stuff like that people aren't normally interested in, but he packaged them in a sense of, we can do better. We don't just have to keep coasting like this. We can think about things that are greater than ourselves. And he spent 200 years in New Hampshire. He went to 10 billion town hall meetings. And town hall meetings in a place like New Hampshire are a great challenge. They're later on in the campaigns, you see them when people are actually nominated, and they're really stupid. I mean, the people who come are all people from the party, and they ask questions like, why don't people understand what a great hero you are? I mean, it's just really not an exciting venue. But early on in a place like New Hampshire, where they really know how to do it, they are totally into it, you get all these amazing encounters. You always have somebody getting up and saying, how do you feel about medical marijuana? And almost invariably, the candidate will say, I don't approve of it. And then the woman will break into tears and say, I have a terminal disease and only medical marijuana makes me feel better. What do you think about that? And then they'll do something, and then you get to see what they'll do. And it's in times like that that you really kind of get a sense of what a candidate's really like. And McCain was just wonderful at those meetings, and he was in New Hampshire forever. And George Bush was sort of the outside guy who had it handed to him, and John McCain was the gritty fighting veteran. And at the end, you know, you'd be in the bus with him, and everybody wanted to be on the bus because he would talk forever. He would really answer every question. He would just sit there for hours and hours. You couldn't go to the bathroom. You couldn't leave. It drove people crazy after a while. But everybody wanted to be on the bus to experience this extraordinary thing of a candidate for president who was acting like a normal human being, which never happens in the real world. And by the end, I will never forget this part. There was a very small woman that was so crowded on the bus by the end because everybody wanted to be there. They put her on the luggage rack up on top. You know, they just kind of laid her out there, and she was taking her notes on the luggage rack. But it was just a great time, and he won that primary. I've often thought afterwards, even he was sort of shocked that he won that primary. But what happened after that was he went down there. The saga that we hear is that then John McCain went down to South Carolina, and then these evil flyers were passed out claiming that he was the father of a bastard young black baby or something. And it did happen, but it didn't have anything to do with his campaign imploding. I think his campaign imploded because he actually did not know how to run for president on a national campaign. He knew how to run for president in the New Hampshire primary, and he couldn't really get beyond that, and that took him out then. When he came back this time, he started out as the favorite, and he instantly imploded. I mean, they spent all their money, they were all disorganized, everything was a mess, and the campaign fell apart. They were bankrupt for all practical purposes. He fired everybody, and he went back to New Hampshire to his roots. And New Hampshire welcomed him back, you know, it was their guy. And it was brave, it was wonderful, it was great to see again. He just went with one guy in a car or something from one town hall to the other, and they, you know, did the same thing. And meanwhile, the interesting thing was, of course, he won the New Hampshire primary because they loved John McCain. That all the other candidates were imploding all around him, which was the part that, you know, no one had actually expected. You know, you expected there were like 10 famous people running for the Republican nomination. You would have thought one of them would have been good, but they were all terrible. And they sort of, well, you kind of know, many of you know Rudy Giuliani, and who's a very local person and whose talents as a mayor were possibly limited, but at least definitely local, and whose campaigning talents were not even very good when he was in New York. He's not a particularly good campaigner, even when he's in a great comfort zone like it is here, but he was just dreadful. I mean, and then he just decided to move to Florida for some reason and do everything in Florida, and that didn't work out, and nobody really liked hearing him. He kind of yelled at everybody, and it was as if he was in court, you know, and he was going to convince you to vote for him by his argument, and it didn't work out. And Mitt Romney, who I thought was going to be the one who would do it, who I thought was sort of the shoo-in at the beginning, just turned out not to be a good candidate. He was just sort of irritating all the time. And kind of smarmy. Perhaps he's learned, and perhaps he will evolve, and next time around will make a comeback. All I can tell you is I spent a lot of time watching Mitt Romney, and to my surprise, he was really a pretty terrible candidate, and nobody liked him. So then there was Fred Thompson was going to come, and Fred Thompson would be the candidate everybody would like, and Fred Thompson turned out to have been stuffed or something. He was really like a taxidermist just walking him around. I mean, he did nothing. Didn't even move, you know. Mike Huckabee sort of came out at the end, but Mike Huckabee had zero money, and he sort of made even the Republicans a little bit nervous. It was kind of interesting, but just the Republicans always like to vote for the person who's supposed to be the presidential nominee. They really kind of go out there and look. It always happens. Who among all these people is the person? Who is the chosen one that we know is going to be the president? You know, George W. Bush was George W. Bush. I cannot tell you how many Republicans told me when he was running, well, if there's anything goes wrong, his mother and father can tell him what to do. I mean, they really believe that stuff. And, you know, John McCain was supposed to be, and then he didn't work out, so it was supposed to be Mitt Romney. They kept looking for the one it was supposed to be, and then in the end, it didn't seem like it was supposed to be Mike Huckabee. So then there's John McCain back again, and John McCain got the nomination. But I would really argue that he did not win the nomination by any great strategy. He kind of just endured until they came around to him again. But he did not know how to run a national campaign, and once he was outside of New Hampshire, nothing really worked well for him. And it's to me, just boiled down to the fact that he can't change. I mean, he has great skills and he has great personal characteristics that everybody who knows him love, but he didn't evolve at all. He was the same guy at the end, except a really cranky version of the same guy that he was at the beginning. But the story of the not changing was, to me, kind of the story of John McCain. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure that any Republican, certainly nobody in that crowd, could have won it this year. And I want to say something about Sarah Palin, though, before we go back. Everybody knows everything there is to know about Sarah Palin at this point in time, but I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the woman end of Sarah Palin, as I saw it anyway. I wrote someplace that Sarah Palin is an absolute child and product of the women's movement. And I got an email from Gloria Steinem saying, if that's true, I will shoot myself tomorrow. But I still do think it's true. She's not necessarily the banner carrier of the women's movement, but she is a person who grew up without, as far as I can tell, any feelings of constraint because of her gender. She had great feelings of inferiority having something to do with class that I could never quite get my finger around, about elites that look down on people, and it seemed to have to do with living in the Wasilla is sort of a town that's sort of an exurb with a lot of, the good days with a Walmart when Walmart came to town, but other than that, there's sort of not much there, and people look down upon the sort of rednecky Arizonans, Alaskans, I think, but she had that feeling of a sense of sort of being oppressed in that way, which I think is understandable, although, when you're running and there's Barack Obama, who was, the child of a single white mother and an African father who left and went back to Africa, being raised at a time when only 20% of the population believed that interracial marriages were not immoral, it would seem to me that Sarah did not really have the key to the feeling that she was being somewhat, looked down upon and discriminated against in her youth. However, she didn't feel that way about being a woman, as far as I can tell, at all. And she had always consistently, whenever she got involved in politics, simply gone after whoever the mentor was who was bringing her up. As soon as whatever male person that was who brought her up to some level, she would turn on him and strangle him and throw him out the door, which I regard as sort of impressive. I thought of, I was right there for that one, and it worked several times for her. But the thing about her that, and you kind of know the rest of her story about what happened to her when she started running, but the thing about her that fascinated me all along was how the hell she had managed to do all this with 5 kids. The question of how she could run for vice president with 5 kids did not seem to me to be a big issue. You can certainly do that, and certainly by the time you're running for vice president, there are helpers around who will really leap in. But the whole vision that she had spent her entire life, she had raised all these kids at a time when, her husband was working in those 2-2 Alaska things where he's home for 2 weeks all the time, and then gone completely for 2 weeks, which is the worst possible way to have a marriage. Either they are on top of you forever, or else they're gone and they're not being any help at all. So I'm told anyway, if you're in Alaska, it's a very difficult way to continue a marriage, but she did that for a long time. She was mayor, she ran for governor, she did all this stuff, and she has all these kids running around, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And she refused. The interesting thing about her was that she refused to ever discuss it. She would just say, well, my generation doesn't care about those things anymore. My generation doesn't worry about that anymore, which is not my experience for those of the generation that have children and are trying to work. They talk about it all the time. And what I found was interesting was that Michelle Obama, who is exactly the same age as Sarah Palin and who has 2 children, worried about it constantly and actually tried to spend, although we sort of lost her during the campaign because things got so heavy with Sarah Palin. She spent most of her time going around doing listening tours of her own, having roundtables in which women would talk about the stress of marriage and work and how hard it was and how difficult it was. And she would talk about how hard it had been when Barack started going off running for stuff, and she had the 2 kids and trying to work, a demanding job, and she had her mother right there, so she was much luckier than most people, but still it was clearly memories and feelings very, very strong with her about how hard this all was. And then there's Sarah Palin. She's got 5 kids, and she's just bounding around happily, and she's running for this and running for that, and she says it's no problem, and I can figure it out. She has a large extended family, and that's one of the answers. She's got quite a few relatives who live very close and help her, but I've come to believe that another part of it is that Alaska is really different from the rest of the country. There's a tradition in America in Western places, as the country moved west, women could do pretty much anything they wanted for a while because there were so few women around that men would really, really, really clear the way to make them reasonably content with wherever they are. That's why women got the right to vote in the West so much earlier than they got anywhere else. I mean, truly, Wyoming, which did it first, thought that this would be a great sort of advertisement for more women to come to Wyoming. Come to Wyoming and vote. That was it. And I talked to people there, and apparently, I talked to a professor at the University of Alaska, and he said that people there often bring their kids to class. That, as long as the kids are quiet, he doesn't care, and that's just the way that they do it in Alaska. And it seems as if she also brought them to work a lot, and people took care of it. The aides took care of it, and she took them on, whenever she went away, she would take a couple of the girls with her on trips. We found out later that she was billing the state for them because they were allegedly part of the governmental contingent who were doing state business wherever they were going. But this sense that you sort of incorporated your children into your work, which is sort of very frontier-y, and which is not at all accepted in most places in the rest of corporate America, I found really fascinating about her, particularly because one of her defenders, appointed by the Republicans, was a woman named Jane Swift from Massachusetts, who had been lieutenant governor. You remember Jane Swift? Jane Swift ran for lieutenant governor. She was a Republican, and her guy got elected, and she was lieutenant governor. And then, it seems to happen a lot in Massachusetts, he left instantly to become an ambassador and left her holding the bag there. And she had been pregnant when she was running, and then she had a baby, and Massachusetts does not have a governor's mansion. And she was commuting from the other side of the state, and her husband was staying home to take care of the kid. And anyway, her aides complained that they'd been asked to babysit. And she made it much worse by saying, "I can't believe they're complaining. Elizabeth is the sweetest baby, and everyone loves to be around her all the time." And it just got worse and worse and worse after that. And then when she got pregnant again, and she's governor now, and she's on bed rest because she's going to have twins, and she's in Western Massachusetts. And everybody hates her so much at this point that they don't want to allow her to do business by phone. I mean, it was just that the rancor about this woman was so amazing to me. But she was basically left politics and went home and started another career as a consultant. But the idea that you've got this one woman sort of bounding around with all these kids in tow running a government, and you've got this other woman who can't even make a phone call from her bed because she's pregnant, and the same country is just really fascinating. And I just think there's a huge story about women and families and this entire election and that particular campaign that we need to go and look at again. Anyway, that brings me back to Barack Obama, which should have been the center of this whole thing. Barack Obama, when I started this all out, I thought this was all going to be about women, and then I thought it would all be about race, and it turned out it was all about generations. I mean, to me, Barack Obama is so much a generational candidate, and he's also a candidate who reminds me of John Kennedy in ways that I had not thought about until recently, mainly in that he came into the Senate without being the least bit interested in the Senate and planning to get out of the Senate as soon as possible and move up. And back in 1960, I'm not sure they cared that much about that, but the senators did resent that about him. John McCain's dislike of Barack Obama was basically key to the fact that Barack Obama did not care about the Senate, which John McCain cares about a lot, and he just wouldn't make the effort to do Senate stuff. He's an extraordinary candidate. And the most extraordinary thing to me about him was that he managed to run and convince people, and I think genuinely, and it could even happen, that there was going to be this huge change without actually having any particular change agenda. I mean, he came from a place, he was a very, very liberal state senator, but he also represented the most liberal district in the entire state of Illinois, so it wasn't surprising. But as a candidate, he was just remarkably good at making people excited about a great future without ever actually pointing to anything very dramatic that was going to change. It was more that everybody was going to change as people, that they were going to work together. And to me, it was a great sort of a rejection of all the politics of the last 20 or 30 years. which are blamed generally on the baby boomers and their evil ways, but which I think have much more to do with the fact that for so long now, the country has been so narrowly divided between the two parties. The congressional races have been won or lost so narrowly that there's a sense that any little thing could lose you the next big race, that any little concession to the other side, that any little allowing the other side to get one little inch ahead of you, and a desperate sort of posturing all the time to get the thing done, to make sure that you're on top, that you're going to win. And nothing ever got done because nobody ever wanted to let the other person get anything done. And I think this is not anything except that each side was so closely divided. I find that the states that have great bipartisan politics are generally the states in which one party is so totally in charge that the other party has given up all hope and just wants to be polite in hopes that some crumbs will fall from the desk or whatever and get their way. If you look at the New York State legislature, you see the hideousness of closely divided politics. It's just been awful forever. And that to me is the thing that Barack Obama was running against. Hillary Clinton ran as a woman with the excitement of being the first woman sort of right up there up front. Barack Obama ran as an American person and never talked about being black. And that had, of course, a lot to do with the fact that Hillary's minority was 52% of the population and his minority was 13% of the population. But it also, I think, did have to do with his vision of the country, that the way you move forward is by presuming that everybody's already there, by treating the country as if it's already gotten past these things, by behaving as if the racial divide is gone and that people will behave according to their best possible lights. And you just go there and presume that's going to happen, and that takes you to where you want to go. And that's a totally younger generation kind of attitude toward politics, as is the idea that we will all work together and that it has to do more with people behaving well. Getting to someplace good is more about everybody behaving well and trying hard and working together than it does about huge ideological divides. And I'll be really interested in seeing how this all works out in practice. Must say, I was talking today to Olympia Snow. My happiest thing about this election is that it looks to me like when the Senate starts having really, really, really heavy issues in which the Republicans are trying to invoke cloture and stop them from doing something, in which the Democrats have to get 60 votes in order to make it happen, every single time the Democrats are going to have to make a pilgrimage to the two ladies from Maine, the two remaining moderates. The only moderates they have left in the Senate now are two Republicans from Maine, Olympia Snow and Susan Collins. And I was talking to Olympia Snow, and she is very much of the Barack Obama, bridges must be built and we can all work together, and if we behave very well, this is all going to work out. But it's a very generational thing. And as a baby boomer, I was really surprised that we were only going to get 2 presidents. I really thought, the World War II generation had 9 presidents. We got 2, and one of them was George W. Bush. This does not seem at all fair to me, but it looks like that's going to be the way it's going to go. And I think the reason we got so shortchanged was because things are moving so fast now. And trying to adapt to the next thing, trying to adapt to all the changes that happen, is something that very few people can do once they're into their late middle age. Hillary Clinton is amazing at the way she can continue to do that over and over again. I think it's very hard, and that's why I think we're going to see more and more younger candidates running for office. And that's why, by the way, I could just say in passing, I think that those of you who are planning careers in journalism have wonderful opportunities ahead for you. Even though right now it looks like the dregs of hell out there in the hiring world. I guess there's going to be a whole new way of writing that I don't understand, that's connected to the web and communicating, that none of us can do, that only you guys can do because you've been growing into it your whole lives. There's going to be a whole new set of things that would have been newspapers, but now the newspapers are all evaporating in towns and cities around the country that are going to be created by you all, that you're going to have to do. I mean, it's going to be an extraordinary time. to be in journalism. And on the campaign, you could see that every day, that the people who were running, who were sitting on the planes, who were in the equivalent of the buses, were all very young. The people who were reporting for the papers were all young, and they were very energetic, and they were capable of doing blogs and videos and audios and typing and then doing a news story and then going back and doing them all over again, and had great technological skills at making all this stuff work back and forth. And the staff did too. I mean, and I got to tell you, this is my last thing I will tell you, and then we could talk and have questions, and you can tell me whatever you want. But the last time I talked to Hillary Clinton was right after she lost, before the convention, and we were just talking about the convention. And then before she hung up, she said, "I wanted to tell you that the days you were on my plane were the happiest days of the campaign for me." And I thought this did not sound right at all to me. And so I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Those were the only days there was someone my age around." And it's true. So to me, the message of this entire campaign that I've come away with after all the amazingness of it, is that it's time for a new generation to take control. And I can't wait to see it happen. I'm looking forward to writing about it, and you're just all going to have to do it all. So go to it, I say. Anyway, that's my story, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'd be happy to answer questions, or if you have any thoughts or comments, I'd be happy to hear them. Oh. You still have to ask questions. That's not really going to get you off the hook at all. So, yeah. Yeah, people, would you come up to the mic? I'm sorry. This is why I should have had a person organizing this thing.
Of course, I'm intrigued about your Sarah Palin observation. And one of the things, well, don't you think Sarah Palin was able to do all of these things because she really isn't really doing much as mayor of Wasilla or governor of Alaska? I mean, she hasn't really accomplished a lot in those positions. So maybe she's not, and maybe Michelle Obama is doing more in her job as she worries about
it. It's possible. One of the interesting things about this has been how much we don't know about Alaska. And the media sort of went through a meltdown, I think, in Alaska long before we got to them. So there's really only a few reporters there kind of desperately running around trying to find out what's going on. So I'm not quite sure about that. I'd always thought lieutenant governor would be the perfect job for a mother to have, because they don't do anything, but it turned out poor Jane Swift turned out to be wrong about that. I don't know. I mean, the people of Alaska seemed happy with Sarah Palin as governor, and the people of Wasilla seemed happy with her as mayor. And you look at her running around, she does seem to be a ball of energy. So I don't know the answer to that. It is possible that that's part of the story too. But it's a story that part of the whole saga, I think, is one I want to keep revisiting, because it's just so many mysteries to me. Anybody else? No one even wants to know how to get a job. This is terrible. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I guess I'll sort of segue this maybe into the future of media, changing media territory. I wonder if you can reflect on some of the coverage that the Times did of the campaign, things that you think, new things that you guys did that you're especially proud of, or that you think you could have done differently. I know you and David Brooks did those conversations online. I think that was sort of new. But if there's anything else you want to highlight, if you could kind of go there.
The thing that we did that I thought was particularly great this year, that everybody was trying to do in different ways, was the complete rigor with which we responded to questions of accuracy on the part of the candidate. I mean, they could barely open their little mouths before we had people out there making lists of what was right, what was wrong, and we never used to do that with that degree of intensity before, and it wasn't certainly just us. Everybody was doing that. And I think that's partly a product of the web and the pressures of the web, which have been, in the main, really, really good, I think, for coverage of this kind of campaign. On the downside, I did love to, David Brooks and I did things in which we go back and forth sort of talking about the campaign. We called them conversations, and they were great fun. That was the most fun thing I did. We're going to try and do those again next year, because it's just very easy and very webby and you could actually do them on your BlackBerry, I found, if you had to. And so that's another thing that I loved. I think on the downside, there's a sense of hysteria about things that has to do with in part that there's so much media. Whenever you've got a period in American history where you've got a lot of media and it's undercapitalized, you have hysteria, because basically almost anybody can start a newspaper or now a website or whatever, but once you've got it, in order to make anything out of it, you've got to get attention. So people shriek a lot, and there's a lot of shrieking that goes on in those kinds of periods, and we're in one right now. And there's also an immediacy about it, so that when something happens, there's a sense that this is the end of all time. You know, when Barack Obama started to falter, when the John McCain did the celebrity ads, I mean, it was 1 week in a period of 9 billion years of the campaign, but it just made people crazy. They thought everything was over. You just had a sense of like them running out and throwing themselves off bridges all over the place, because everything that happened, Sarah Palin, when she looked popular for a few weeks there, everything was like the end of the world, and the sense that you normally would have in a campaign of, well, let's see how people react after a week or two is kind of lost because of, and so there was a lot more of that kind of hysteria that I think we'll learn as we go on to get around. That would be my other thought.
Your thoughts on Bill Clinton's role in the campaign and where he might be with her Secretary of State?
During the campaign, when he was in his bad state, or his rogue state there, at the beginning he was great. You know, he would give this speech, this very nice speech about, you know, which was a little weird. It was, he kept saying that when he was in Yale, he told Hillary that he knew all the great minds of their generation and hers was the finest. And I thought, God, you'd have to be Bill Clinton to be in law school and think you knew all the great minds of your generation already, you know? Well, he'd been to Rhodes, you know, but Oxford, gee. But when he went sort of loopy, I thought in many ways it was a man, an alpha dog reaction to having to be put in a position in which basically you do the smiling, adoring look kind of thing that women have had to do in campaigns all that time, and that the restraint of what you're supposed to do in the spouse position in those campaigns is really excruciating. I mean, you're not supposed to really say anything interesting. You're supposed to talk about how great your person is and not complain about anything. And he just couldn't. He just exploded over and over again. And I think a lot of it was just the ego of a very big, important guy, you know, not being able to control things and just going nuts. I think he might do well. You know, I've talked to a lot of people who thought, God, who've said, you know, if he could be sent on a mission. And all the missions always sound like they're places that are pretty far away. To Darfur comes up quite a bit. If he could be sent to Darfur, that, you know, that could be great. I mean, he's beloved around the world. He's just extraordinary. I mean, you wouldn't want to waste him. But the trick is to find a role in which he can actually be active and play a more than just ceremonial part, but yet not gum everything up and get in the way. I mean, it's very tricky, but it is smart that they're in the administration. I think it's a really great move. Yeah.
I have to take it out. Actually, I have two questions. First, do you think John McCain likes Sarah Palin? And if Schwarzenegger could have run, do you think he would have had a chance?
If who?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. He could have run. Well, given what's happening to California now, this is not Arnold's year. You know. It's like you really want to find a year when your state is not going bankrupt, that you're going to leap into the greater glory of things. But I don't think he actually knew Sarah Palin well enough to have a strong opinion about her. He only really hung out with her once. He really liked, apparently, the kind of wildness of her campaign, all these kids running around all over the place, and he loved the fact that her husband was this. He talked about all the time about this, you know, snowmobiling guy who broke his arm and still snowmobiled for 200,000 miles and all that stuff. I mean, he just loved all that about her. And I don't think he knew a lot of the other stuff. You know, the candidate does not really keep up with all the weirdness of the campaign. So I'm not sure at what point he realized that she had actually become a problem and how he reacted to it. But I think at that point things had gone so astray on so many fronts that he didn't really focus that much on. I've never heard that he made any specific complaints about him. Yeah.
So you mentioned that Hillary Clinton's campaign made it easier for people to perceive a woman being the president. But I'm just wondering, since Sarah Palin came on the scene, if you think that changes how a woman needs to be, like how she needs to act and portray herself as a candidate, because it seems like Hillary Clinton was always criticized for being kind of mannish and aggressive, but then Sarah Palin, people really praised her, and she really fit the conformed to what a female should be or a mother should be.
I don't think she's just her. I don't know that you're going to be able to find many Sarah Palin-like possibilities out there. She's sort of a unique character in many ways, and I think you probably would have to be in Alaska. Honestly, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I mean, you need to be somewhere far away where you could kind of cook somebody like that and then bring her out at the last minute. But, and I don't think that her candidacy hurt women in particular, but it is absolutely true that the fact that she was young and attractive was her big, selling point, and we haven't yet figured out how you make a middle-aged sort of, dowdy woman that kind of exciting, just on the basis of her policies. But I got to tell you, Hillary at the end had gotten the moves. I would truly, one of the memorable moments of the campaign was when I was coming from South Dakota. It was way at the end, when she had really loosened up a lot, and she was standing in the aisle of the plane having a cocktail and telling jokes with the reporters, and that has not been done by a presidential candidate in like 25 years, really. That's just so everything that we know now. And she was, so I think there's that Hillary came closer to finding a useful model that a lot of people can use in the future. But I'm sure if anybody ever sees another 44-year-old sexy woman who can shoot moose, who actually knows where the other countries are and stuff, I mean, it'll be a very powerful combination. Go ahead.
Can you share your thoughts on the current Obama administration as we know it and what it might hold for the future?
Everybody loves this group so much. That's sort of terrifying. I've never seen so much enthusiasm about a government in my entire life. But another woman thing I was thinking of today, you looked at that national security team, and most of them are women. I mean, if Bill Clinton had done that, everybody would have been, falling down on the floor. Oh my God, so many. But it's so weird how fast people get used to this stuff. They all seem like a fun group. I think it's very expressive of the true Barack Obama, who is so much a careful person, and sort of without any, for somebody who's got a very big ego in his own way. I mean, he's ego-free in other ways completely. I mean, he's just not afraid of like many big, huge gorillas chomping around all over him. It'll either be really great or it'll be a real mess, but it seems certainly worth trying. And it's not like there are billions of people out there. It's not like there are all these genius, great, exciting thinkers who have brilliant ideas and great experience and background who he's ignoring. I mean, we had the Bush administration, and he's taking them from the Clinton administration, and before that, I mean, my God, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, these people are almost dead by now. So I think it all seems reasonable to me. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, by the way. And one of the things that came out after the election was that Barack Obama's team had been keeping track of things that President Bush was sort of sneaking in towards the end of his presidency that he wanted to reverse. He's got a whole sort of slew of people that are centrist, establishment, almost Democrats. Do you think come climate change, environmental stuff, that gives him political cover to put out-of-the-box new people in and do something kind of unconventional there? Or do you think it's going to be more of the sort of establishment centrist people?
I'll be interested to see if there's any place that he puts a really exciting, weird choice. It would be either environment or energy, somewhere along in that line. I could imagine that conceivably happening, but it's going to, he's got such a mess with the economy. It's going to be really interesting to see how much of anything you can do. There's a great consensus now in the nation about wanting to do stuff about energy and the economy. It's just that nobody's actually, including Barack, who was not good about this during the campaign, nobody has actually ever said to people, let's all do this, and by the way, your electric bills will go up, and you're going to have to do this and have to do that, and and our cost of living will rise or whatever. I mean, there's never been a real suggestion that there'll be much of a price to pay. So that would be, once we get to that point, it'll be fascinating to see what happens. But yeah, I think you're right. If there's any place that he really will push the envelope, that would be it, something along that line. Yeah.
I was also just sort of curious about the whole women thing. With Hillary Clinton, you said people are now ready. Are there any other women that you can see, in 8 years, 4 years, 8 years running? Do you think she would run again? Are there other women who might be in line?
I think she would think about running again in 4 years for sure. In 8 years, she'd still be younger than John McCain was this time around. But we do have the getting older and having trouble changing your patterns thing. But she still does it, so it's possible. And I think she certainly thinks so. And she sort of does suck the air out for other women Democrats to some degree, and that's kind of a problem. I asked Olympia Snowe when I talked to her today if she wasn't sort of pissed off that nobody, this is a woman who's been in the Senate, she's been all around the world, she's got, extraordinary, the Finance Committee, great background, and that, nobody even mentioned her, Sarah Palin. And she just kept saying, I've never really met Sarah Palin, but she was certainly a surprise. And she said that about 14 times, and I sort of got the idea, So yeah, I bet that something will happen. And if they come, what we have to do is get state legislatures to be less awful than they are so that they have more turnover and you get more women up there, and that's sort of how you do that stuff. Yeah.
There was so much hand-wringing during the campaign by female baby boomers who are Hillary supporters about why women my age weren't rallying more strongly to Hillary. And my mom, who's a baby boomer, is always asking me that she just can't fathom it. And I guess as a 25-year-old, I sort of have a few vague ideas of why I think that is with my friends, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
I did early on, actually, because I was trying to finish my book. I would, interview people at great length about that. And it's interesting in that what interested me most was that it was not a strong reaction for the most part on the part of younger women. It wasn't like younger women were saying, oh no, I hate that and I would never do that and who cares about women or anything like that. It was sort of a much easier, well, that's good, and I would love to have a woman president. I'd also like to have the African-American president. They were both fine, but of the two fine people, I like Barack Obama better. What is our problem here? And that's that same generational thing that's different. And there's just no way, the women of that age, grew up at a time when women couldn't get credit without their husbands co-signing for it. Women couldn't serve on juries in a lot of states. It was perfectly legal to say women couldn't have X job, or that you could have it, but you only got a third of what the man got. All that stuff was legal. So there's a lot of baggage that women of that generation carry that you don't. And so it's all good. It's not a bad thing, but, cutting your mom a little bit of slack. She's been through a lot, That's yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So my question is sort of about the interweb and the infinite and free air that exists there and how that's going to affect future campaigns, obviously with sort of fundraising from Howard Dean to Obama. And sort of wondering what you thought about that.
The whole organization of the Obama campaign, which was based entirely, on the web, is the modern marvel like the Taj Mahal or something. It was just extraordinary, until even last cycle, you would use the web, people would write into your website and, would say, I want to be part of the John Kerry campaign or whatever, and then you get an email saying, great, your closest John Kerry place is, here, and if you go there, we'd love to have you come and volunteer. You might even get a follow-up letter or something. That was the way it was organized. This year, you in any way make a peep in the universe indicating any liking of Barack Obama whatsoever, and instantly you get a letter saying, I see you live on Elm Street. Your friend Marietta down the street is having a party this weekend, and it's only a block away, and why don't you go? We're all going to call people up and ask them to vote for Barack. Bring your cell phone, and, we're going to have cookies, and wine will be served, and come, and then Mary might send you something later, and then you go down the block, and you do your thing, and then all those people you call are then on the date of this. And then afterwards, you get letters back from them. I talk to these people now. They're waiting to serve. They are now part of Team Obama, and they're waiting for their next assignment, and I don't know if it's going to work. It's so much easier to get people mobilized to get rid of George Bush than it is to pass the health care bill or whatever it is that the next thing will be. But it was just amazing, and does transform campaigns completely, as did the fundraising thing. And I can't help but think that all that is way, 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 way better than what we saw before, which was basically the rich people in different rooms getting together. So it seems like all good to me, really. Yeah.
To switch gears a little bit, I was wondering if you could walk us through the process of coming up with material for your columns. Like, do you keep a running list, or how do you go about that?
It's interesting. It has not been a problem over the last year and a half because there's been so much stuff. I mean, it was just sort of most days. The trick was to keep moving until fairly late in the campaign. I tried to get out at least once a month or twice a month on somebody's campaign or to see somebody out there, and sort of that, because you don't have to do it if you're a columnist. So it's harder to mobilize yourself kind of to get out and do it. Amanda was in charge of that, of nagging me and getting me out there. But beyond that, there was just so much stuff that it was just a matter of kind of filtering down and figuring out which of the several things you could write about would work. It's going to be much, much harder now that the campaign is over, and you have to think way farther in advance about what the possible subjects are and what's going to be happening over the next week, and talking to people about it, because it's very important to try to be on the news as much as you can. People don't really want to hear about what happened 2 weeks ago. They want to be fairly current. So I don't know yet, but it'll be much harder is all I know at this point in time. And I'm going to be miserable for until the next election cycle begins. Till Mitt Romney comes back into my life, I will not be happy. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk more also about covering a campaign. By all accounts, it seems like information is so much more controlled now than it ever has been previously. And I'm just curious, do you think this is going to continue? And how the hell do you cover a campaign when these candidates are keeping such tight control over the flow of information and the narratives that they want to get out? How do you get away from that? And is that why there's so many little micro scandals that just pop up and disappear and pop up and disappear just to kind of get something that's outside of their talking points? I don't know.
It is to a great degree. This is a very weird campaign, and thank you for asking that, because the first part of the campaign, in which we were all kind of focused on Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and the falling off of all the Republicans, but basically the whole story, the really interesting story was Barack and Hillary, I think, for a long time. They had so little they didn't agree on that it was very hard to have a policy debate. So it all degenerated very fast into this kind of gotcha thing about, oh, he said that, I know that, or she said that, or she made an error, he made an error. There wasn't anything about what they really thought about anything. I thought when we got into the real campaign, we'd actually have a lot more real arguments about policy. And I think that was eaten up by the economy. John McCain certainly expected that he'd be arguing about Iraq for the campaign. That was what he came into the campaign ready to do. He had his Iraq argument. And he was eager to do it with Barack Obama, of all people. But it never really happened because people didn't really care that much at that point. All they cared about was the economy. And both of them were at a loss, as was every human being in the country, about exactly what to do. But Barack's attempt to deal with it was legitimately a much saner, calmer, more deliberative one than McCain's. So he won without doing anything except being sensible. So we never really had those arguments, and we did degenerate a lot because of that. You're looking for something to write about any given day. It's hard to really write about the economy when it's imploding and none of the candidates really are disagreeing about it. They're just kind of all walking around with talking points. So it was a way different campaign than I thought it would be, and it was not, when it comes down to policy, I think a particularly good one, I'm afraid.
Well, do you think, I'm sorry, just to follow, do you think that's a characteristic of this election or the general trend in politics? Can there ever be another Straight Talk Express where the candidate will actually sit down and...
Probably, it'll be interesting to see how the web works on that, but for the most part, it can't be, because there never has been in our lifetime since they invented TV, practically, a Straight Talk Express. There was one for John McCain in New Hampshire, which is this little weeny place, The trick is to appear to be as normal as you possibly can, but it's just not a normal circumstance. It's a totally abnormal circumstance, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's just every single word you say will be gobbled up. And I cannot tell you how many fights there were on the campaign when they would come back and say, Barack would like to come by and visit with the reporters, but he'd like it to be off the record. And that was a sign that two things were going to happen. One, there would be a fight about whether or not it would be off the record, because some of the reporters would say, I think rightly, it can't be off the record because if he says something important, we have to report it. And no matter what he says, somebody here is going to put it on some website anyway, so it doesn't make any difference, so we cannot make it off the record. Then when he came back, whether it was off the record or on the record, he would tell you some cute thing his daughter said. I mean, there was nothing. There was no sitting around having a... Even John McCain on the Straight Talk Express, you did not have long conversations about how to fix Social Security. It was more kind of back and forth and politics and but he was there if you wanted to ask him a specific question. But it wasn't like this deep policy group think going on forever. So no, I'm afraid not. Sorry. At the end, yeah.
I was wondering if you could just talk about opinion writing and if it took you a very long time to develop your voice or if it didn't take very long at all. And also wondering if you ever get nervous that you won't come up with something in time, or are you always really confident that you'll deliver on deadline?
I'm always really confident that I will deliver something by deadline. There are many days when I am not confident it will be anything that anybody in their right mind would want to read. So that's the part that's scary. But I mean, I have a level of professionalism that makes me confident that 800 words that include sentences with verbs in them will show up at the end of the day, but that's about the extent of it. And the way you develop a voice basically is by just writing a hell of a lot. The way that I did journalism, my sort of seminal critical moment, was when I was in Connecticut and I had a news service. I was covering the state legislature for 32 papers, and several of them were dailies, and none of them wanted the same story. I mean, they all wanted stories specifically about their legislators and their towns. So basically, there were many days when I was writing. I had a partner, so the two of us between us were writing like 20 or more stories in one day. Obviously, these were not great creative stories. These were pretty basic things, but if you write that much, you get to a point where you can do the basic thing without thinking. You know, so I can dictate a news story, a basic story, without writing anything down. And once you hit that point, which is actually very hittable, believe it or not, then you can really have much more fun with it and play with it and, you know, just make it much more conversational because you really are feeling like you're having a talk with whoever the reader is. But the trick to doing that, I think a lot of it just has to do with just writing a wicked lot when you're young. So I would recommend a wicked lot of writing if you possibly can manage it. Preferably on deadline. Yeah.
You mentioned that in the past the Republican Party has had one candidate who was going to be their nominee. Do you think that Sarah Palin has any chance of being that in 4 or even 8 years, or is the party so factioned that in its reevaluation it's just going to just completely overlook her?
That's a really good question. You know, I'm not really sure what's going to happen to the Republican Party. The Republican Party is not sure what's going to happen to the Republican Party. At times like this for a party, you tend to have a division between the people who feel that the problem is you weren't true to your base, you weren't true to your core beliefs, and the people who think that you just have to forget about all that. And I remember talking to so many hardcore liberals back in 1992 when Bill Clinton was running, people who had spent their entire lives saying, no compromise, and there's this guy who's all squishy and moderate in the middle, and they're saying, we gotta win this, I don't care what he did, I don't care anything about him, no matter what, you know, as long as he hasn't murdered anybody, it's okay by me, we just want to win. And if they may get into that mode, and if they do, then that's a whole different story. I truly think Sarah Palin has a lot of gifts, but not even the base of the Republican Party is going to welcome a candidate who can't speak intelligently about national issues. She's got to get herself up to speed on that stuff. And I don't know whether she's actually capable of doing that or not. I have no idea. She's clearly an intelligent person, but she doesn't frankly seem all that interested in a lot of these issues. So that's the question for me. If she chose to do so, I think she could be a very powerful contender. I just don't know if she's got that kind of discipline. I just have no idea.
I have a totally different question. You talked a lot about the election being about a woman and a black man and a generational thing. How come the New York Times, as op-ed writers, has mainly older white men and none of these people? Especially given the fact that the publisher is very open-minded too.
When I was the editorial page editor, we only had one woman columnist. And I'm sorry, I'll get to you next. Sure. And I was asked every 5 minutes why we do not have more women columnists. And we've got a lot, actually, if you compare, if now you add on all the web columnists that we have, like people like Judith Warner, we have a lot more women than we did before. And there is never any excuse for not having more diversity rather than less in your group. I can only say, and this is not an excuse for anything, but it's an interesting problem I have come up with, and I don't know the answer to, is that if you look, and this is not typical of the Times, it's typical of newspapers in general, at the people who write letters to the editor, they're like 70 to 80% male. If you look at the people who send unsolicited op-eds to papers, they're like way over 2/3 of them are men. There is something still today that makes women less excited about taking strong opinionated stances in public. That I thought we'd be past by now, and I think the reason it doesn't seem like we're past by now is that the younger generation is not are not doing these vehicles. The younger people are not mainly, thinking about writing letters to the editor or writing op-eds for the paper. They're doing other stuff, and they're not ever going to be columnists like me. Nobody, I don't think, under the age of 40 is interested in learning how to write 800 words twice a week on deadline, which is the critical central skill of a columnist, because there's really no reason. I mean, it's a nice thing to learn. It's hard, but I would recommend it if you want to do it. But the future web thing is not going to sit around saying, oh no, it's 700 words, you can't put it on the web today, or it's 1,000, you're out, go away forever. So it just seems to me that we're in a strange place that is making it a little bit more difficult to do those balancing acts than before. And I think that the next generation will be balanced in a new and better way than we are right now. And it's not an excuse, we should do better, but those are the observations I can share with you. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about Joe Biden, what role he played in the campaign, and what role he might play in the administration.
Joe Biden, I'm hoping he'll come back out, because the great terror for me is that, Barack Obama is the least silly candidate in the entire history of the universe. And I kind of feed off silly. So Joe Biden is so way more likely to say something silly than Barack Obama is that, I just yearn for the day that he returns. But right now, he's being very careful to keep a very low profile. And I think he's kind of waiting for assignments. And I would hope they'd be forthcoming. He's a very smart guy and has particularly great relationships with the Senate, and I would presume that he would spend a lot of time sort of Rahm Emanuel is much more a guy from the House, and I would presume that Biden would spend a lot of time working with the Senate and doing foreign affairs stuff. But he doesn't have he's certainly not going to be a Cheney kind of figure. And I've been impressed and surprised by how very quiet he's been recently, because he's clearly trying not to make any noise while they're doing all these difficult dances that they're doing right now. So we don't know what he's going to be like, but I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping it'll be an active role. Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about religion in this election. It seemed to come up every once in a while. It was a huge deal about Reverend Wright, Mitt Romney's being a Mormon, and then with Proposition 8, it kind of reared its head again. Were there just other issues that overshadowed it throughout the campaign, or is the kind of religious right in decline?
It'd be interesting to see. That's a good question. One of the reasons it didn't come out more during this campaign is that John McCain is not really into that. And I mean, you would need some kind of a candidate out front who was sort of running with it a little bit more. I think that the religious right was not thrilled with John McCain, although they clearly were with Sarah Palin. So it sort of took the steam out a little bit. And it's also true that I feel like the country was just tired of that, especially if you've got a huge economic crisis. You are not going to waste any of your time screwing around with this kind of thing. So that's part of it too. I found it very interesting that there was a number of votes in referendum on abortions that I found surprisingly tolerant, and especially South Dakota. That South Dakota once again rejected the idea of doing this wide, full-scale anti-abortion legislation. But on the other hand, the gay marriage thing clearly did not do well. I mean, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't think in economic hard times, it's just not as interesting to people as when you're thinking about trying to define yourself versus the other. When you're having economic times, the other is always somebody who's screwing, who's firing you or something. It's not anybody who's getting married or that stuff. So not the year for it, but could come back in the future, I would say. Yeah.
I read or heard that at the third press conference that Barack Obama gave a few days ago, that he actually seemed to be very interested in the questions that were asked, and he didn't call on the networks first. And I wonder if you could comment on what we can expect from this administration and how it deals with the press.
It'll be interesting to see. He does not like the press in particular, and I don't think that's a value judgment. I think he doesn't like. Whenever he doesn't like stuff, it's because it's dumb. I mean, that's his great harsh criticism, saying it's a really dumb thing. He thought the 32 debates were really dumb. I mean, a lot of things, and he thinks the war in Iraq was dumb. I mean, there's a wide range of dumb things, but that's his dumb or not dumb are kind of his categories. And I think journalists in general are more dumb than not dumb. I mean, there are some of them that he likes to talk with. I know he had some good talks with Joe Sarah about the economy and stuff like that, but your general daily press conference, if you get a candidate, is not usually a very inspiring event. I mean, it's always sort of the same. What would you say to those who say that it seems like, Sarah Palin is saying something that's racist, and there's just nowhere you're going to go with that. So, he does. So, but it may be now that he's getting more of a sense that that there's stuff to talk about, that they're prepared to talk about the stuff that he's prepared to talk about, and that he's in charge. It may be that the relationship will get better. A governing president generally has more smarter press conferences than a political candidate, where it's always kind of slightly stupid. So. It may be that things will get better. I cannot say that right now he's one of the great chumps, which is funny because everybody says, oh my God, the press was so easy on Barack Obama, they liked him so much, and they hated McCain. I mean, the press for 5 billion years was, in love with John McCain, and I don't think Barack Obama has any close friendships with people in the press. So it's a weird relationship, but he's certainly blossoming in many ways. I know he feels like he's doing a really good job now. Everybody feels he's doing a really good job now. He feels in control, and I think he's happy. As happy as one can be in this general situation that he finds himself. So yeah, we'll see. He'll be fun. I can't wait. Yeah.
I'm just curious if you have any advice for those of us who are still interested in being columnists.
Didn't say you weren't going to be one. I'd say you weren't going to be one like I am, the 800-word columnist. You'll be some kind of greater kind of better columnist. It is, first of all, to become a reporter. The important thing about being a columnist, an opinion person of any kind, is to be able to bring information to those opinions so that the people who read your pieces actually come out of it knowing something more than they went into it, not just having their beliefs reinforced, which is what they really love more than anything else. But really, over the long run, you can really get tired doing that. And then to just write a whole lot in whatever form you find most, that you like the best, and just to keep trying to think of it more as a conversation with the reader rather than as a public presentation to the world kind of thing, and to just network like crazy. That would be an important one. The networking part, really, 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 and be entrepreneurial. Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for a second question. I'm very heartened to hear your comment about the future of journalism, but a lot of my colleagues are kind of worried, and I'm a little worried because we hear that people are rewriting press releases. It's hard to carefully phrased questions when you're involved with camera angles, and there seems to be so much emphasis on production and being able to work with all these media, and good storytelling sometimes I think is in peril and may fall by the wayside. And so could you speak a little bit more about your optimism? I'd like to.
More optimism is the question.
Or if you could just say that more about this transition that we seem to be in.
One of the things that's happening right now is that the web is only into packaging. And the jobs on the web right now are, not all, certainly, but the vast number of jobs on the web right now for writers are packaging jobs that involve taking stuff that somebody else has written and reformatting it and squishing it down or making it longer and getting it graphs and making links to it and stuff like that, rather than actually creating new stuff. That's going to be a transition period too, particularly as there's less and less stuff outside the web to steal from. You know, there's going to be much more of a call for stuff being created within the web. In the meantime, I think the important thing is to master those skills so that you can use them to your own advantage. You know, it is true that everybody who is out there now has 5,000 machines with them. I mean, you've got, really, you're connected all over the place, and you just sort of walk around with a bundle of, you know, wires. You know, actually, there was one of our editorial writers went to Albany for something, and she, you know, she had her computer, and she had her BlackBerry, and she had her Kindle, which she's very attached to, and she had all this other stuff, and she had making sure to get all her batteries in and all of her connectors in and all that stuff. And she realized when she got to Albany, she forgot to pack any clothes. All she had was batteries, you know. So don't go that far. But I think that the mastering of all these techniques is one of the keys to being able to move to the next thing, because the next kind of writing and the next kind of communicating involves using all this stuff. And it's maybe be more like making documentaries, or maybe it'll be something else. But I don't give up the direct writing normally part of it, but I think that if you add all that other stuff to it, it's going to make it much easier for you to make all the jumps that are going to be made over the next 10 or 15 years. It's not going to be an easy time, but it's going to be a time of many opportunities if you're entrepreneurial and curious and eager to explore. And I truly believe that, you know, I'm looking at Connecticut right now, and half the papers in Connecticut are in danger of going bankrupt at the end of this year. They might, but I do not believe that that means that nobody in New Britain or Bristol or New Haven or any of these places is going to get news anymore. People are going to figure out a way to put this on the web that'll be in some ways better than the last generation of local reporters were in some of these towns, I guarantee you. And it'll be really exciting. Starting new stuff up and, you know, having adventures and making mayors pissed off and all that stuff is just really wonderful. And all that stuff is going to happen, and it's going to happen all around the country, and you're all the ones who are going to do it. And it'll be a great time. You may want to have a spouse with health benefits. But other than that, it's going to be really, really, really good. Or maybe the health care, you know, thing will happen, and you know, Barack Obama will save you. Yeah.
I get on Sarah Palin. She was talking a lot about the problems with the mainstream media and how it was just the bane of her existence. But I'm staunchly in the other camp. I don't see how blogs and so-called citizen journalism could ever take the place of credible news organizations. How do you see? Well, first of all, do you think that a lot of people actually hold her belief that legacy or established news organizations are liberal and a problem? And then also, I guess as a follow-up, do you think that blogs are ever going to become more than just a soapbox?
I think that the mainstream media, everybody thinks the mainstream media is either too liberal or too conservative. Everybody thinks the mainstream media does not reflect whatever it is they believe. And it's just the bane of our lives. And it gets particularly complicated because now a lot of the mainstream media is reflecting political positions. I mean, MSNBC and Fox have figured out this way, and there's a lot of that going around. So we have to readjust our approach to this in some way as things continue to evolve like this. I know we have to readjust our approach as things continue to evolve like this. Did you get that down? That was deep and thoughtful. I don't know what's going to happen with the mainstream media. I don't know whether it's going to get more opinionated or less opinionated. I don't know that it's that big a problem. As long as you have a very large thing that's prepared to be sued, that's prepared to make corrections, that's prepared to be answerable for what they do, it's not that huge a problem. The problem for bloggers and people like that is that they're often anonymous, that they have no investment in what they're doing except their own time. And we had the guy from Google the other day in, and he kept pointing out to us over and over again, whenever we would say something about how could that happen, he would say, remember, if only 0.1% of humankind is completely, totally nuts, that's still a lot of people, you know, and it's true, and they're out there, and they have lots of time on their hands, usually. So there's going to be a lot of strange and erroneous things, and the thing that citizen journalism and blogging and everything else presume is that somehow the truth will rise to the top. And perhaps it will, but it takes quite a while. You know, and that's why you need something like the mainstream media. You need some arbitrator there to say, well, we looked into this, and this thing is true, and that thing is not true. And if you don't believe us, well, then, you know, sue us because, or we'll try to correction if we're wrong. And that's the thing that we're kind of missing now on the web. Although we did have a meeting once with the bloggers a few years ago, and the bloggers were arguing that we should make reporters notes free on the web. And our editor who was with them said, you know, we couldn't afford to do that, we wouldn't do it anyway. And she said, you know, I don't think you understand, like, somehow we have to make money in this business because it costs us a lot of money to have reporters. She said it costs us $1 million to keep our Baghdad Bureau going every year. And one of the main chief bloggers of the universe said, we don't need Baghdad bureaus, we just need to get everybody in Iraq a computer. And they can all blog, and then we'll know what's going on. And the idea of like billions of blogs all around the world sort of, you know, escaping and attacking one another like little microbes is sort of scary to me, but that's one way of thinking about it, I guess. So I think we're all done here, it looks like to me. Listen, I really appreciate your coming. It was great to see you all, and good luck with that.